It is actually not a surprise to me that that song should come up, even though I've never heard it before. We're talking today about the journey to freedom. And the journey, oddly enough, it's full of contradictions. First of all, to go on this journey, you need to sit down. Kind of. In order to be guided through this journey, you need to stop trying to take the wheel. I remember seeing not a license plate, but a bumper sticker that said, if God is your co-pilot, you're in the wrong seat. And so this journey is one of both activity, treat and move your feet, as we would say, but it is also one of intense stillness and surrender and letting go. And so I really want to make it clear that the journey to freedom happens entirely in consciousness, and we are guided from that, from our seated position, as to when it's time to take a stand and when it's time to sit down, when it's time to simply call in greater good, and it's time to answer the call. These are things that often shove people off this journey to freedom because they are nonsensical and they are not something you will ever get a raise for, and you can't put any of this on a loan application at a bank. Some of the stuff I will teach you as part of this teaching is just, I think that there's a Native American tradition called Heyoka, which is crazy magic. It's what the god Loki was imagined to do and be. It was all of the weird trickster gods. And it is our journey. And there are ways, there are maps that can help. So long as you don't get so busy following the map that when the lady in your phone tells you to take a left into the lake, you don't actually do that. Some people actually do. I don't understand that, but there you go. So the journey to freedom will never end in freedom unless you pack it when you leave. When you go on this journey, you need to understand that you have already packed, that the God within you, the divine being that is within you, has packed your bag full of all the good that you think you're going out there to get. And that's the big secret. That's the wonderful part of this, is that if you will sit down and start to listen, there are powerful ways to realize that what you want already exists for you. Now, two of the maps, remember that these are maps, they are not infallible. The bridge might be out somewhere. You might have to kind of take a look around and check everything I ever tell you against your own, I used to call it my BS monitor. BS, of course, standing for belief system. Check it against your own common sense. Try it out, see how it works for you. So, two of the maps that I have found very useful, which are very, very similar, are what are called the kingdoms of consciousness, which was explained in the work by Lloyd Straub and Marcia Sutton, or what's called the stages of consciousness that was described by Reverend Dr. Michael Bernard Beckwith. When I name these names, just assume that there's a reverend or a doctor or both or Lord High Muckety Muck in front of the name somewhere. These two maps are very, very similar, and I find them incredibly useful. In the first, out of the four, in the first kingdom or stage of consciousness, you have the innocent baby. You have that physical being that is entirely, or appears entirely powerless. If this is the type of energy being held by an adult, we call it victimhood. We call it where if you are in this particular kingdom, and you will go through all of them at some point in your life, most of us hang out in 1 and 2, but you will end up, you don't think it's a linear progression. This is more of a tangled thread type of map. Kingdom 1, you are at the effect, or you believe yourself to be acted on by other powers. Whether it's you think your weight is in charge of you, you think drugs and alcohol are where your good is, you think it's your boss or your parents or your spouse or your whatever that is doing to you, and that, or the economy is doing it to you. That is just the first stage of consciousness. Now, in a baby, it's entirely appropriate. There are times where we are legitimately under the impression that we don't have much power in a situation, or at least we don't have much control. Let me distinguish between power and control. We may not have control in a certain situation. If someone we love has cancer, we can't go in there and tell the doctor, just push this button here and all will be well. If someone we love is in their sadness or in their joy or in some kind of state that we think is inappropriate, we don't get really to take that away. I mean, I can ruin somebody's day if I really want to, but they're probably going to avoid me after that, right? I don't have control over other people, and that's as it should be. God is within them, and in their power is there. But in the first stage of consciousness, often our prayer sounds like, please God, rescue me. Please God, fix me. Please God, fix this other person, and then everything will be fine. I will be happy when this external thing happens. And so that thing out there we think is in charge of our happiness, we have made the God of our understanding. Whether it's drugs and alcohol or sugar or books or our paycheck. I mean, there's so many ways that we Americans are so good at allowing something else to be in charge of us. So if you are watching this from some other country, or your life traditions, your country or your culture are slightly different, good for you. I'm sure you have your own ways of making something outside of you powerful and giving it control, or the appearance of control over you. The second stage or kingdom of consciousness is where instead of things being done to us, things are done by us. And this is where the science of mind, this philosophy that we teach here, really, really shines. In the science of mind, we teach spiritual tools. We teach prayer, we teach meditation, we teach tithing, we teach gratitude, we teach forgiveness. We teach basically all of the same things all of the other great philosophies teach, with some slight differences, with our own, same stew, different spices, whatever. If you are praying in the way that we teach prayer, it's no longer, dear God, outside of me, please fix anything. It's, I am one with the divine, and the divine within me looks like this. The divine is infinitely powerful, infinitely love, infinite freedom. And that lives inside of me. And so I am communing with this being and claiming the good. Emma Curtis Hopkins used to say, there is good for you and you ought to have it. You don't have to ask permission to receive your good. The truth is, so long as you're not hurting anybody else with it, why not? God loves to be lavish. Look how many stars are in the sky. Look how many grains of sand are on the ground. Look at how things in the air get recycled and reused and repurposed over and over again. Why, if God is so rich and so lavishly abundant, shouldn't you partake in that good? You are, so long as you're not like taking the food out of somebody else's mouth, which tells me you don't really understand how much good there is to share. So long as you're not hurting anybody, including yourself, there's lavish good all around you, and all of it, you beautiful, magnificent soul, all of it is available to you. These are the tools that we teach. This is the power of the science of mind. We use our personal willpower to change how we think, Because in Kingdom 2 or Stage 2, what you learn is that there are natural laws that work just like the law of gravity or any law of physics. And once you learn how those work and you use them in your own life, you can create anything. We could collectively, should we choose to use these tools, create world peace like this. It would be a hoot. And I'm down for that. Nobody would be homeless. Nobody would be scared. Nobody, or would need to be scared. Nobody would be alone or feel themselves to be alone. If we were to all use these tools, we would create what the Centers for Spiritual Living vision is, which is a world that works for everyone and every living being. Everybody would have a home. Everybody would have food. Everybody would have water. Everybody would have access to whatever it was we all felt was in the greater good. Those tools are what we pull together and call the law of cause and effect. This is how it works. The cause is our thinking. The effect is the world that we see out in the world. And Ernest Holmes spent his life teaching how to use that law. At the end of his life, he did say, well, he had done a fantastic job of teaching how to use the law. If he had to do it over again, he would spend a little less time on the law and more time on love. Because we talk about all's love, but all's law. We talk about how those two things need to work together to create the world. And so instead of willing things into being, or what I call efforting things into being, trying to force the world at the level of effect to behave using all these wonderful tools we've got, the only thing we need to do is control our own thinking. To stop, to choose to clean up whatever's in this space up here. Like taking the boulders out of the road on our journey to freedom. That boulder might be unforgiveness. That boulder might be, I don't know, you know what it is in you. A belief that there's not enough to go around. A belief that some people aren't worthy of that good. That some people need to be punished. That some people haven't earned it yet, including you. And so we come to Stage 3 or Kingdom 3. In this kingdom, everything is done through us. There is a prayer attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Mother Teresa used to talk about being a pencil in the hand of God, writing a love letter to the world. I believe it's Rumi that has a poem about being a flute through which the breath of God is playing music. The great mystics and sages know that they are being used by this tremendous power that is part of who they are. And so if we can surrender to that and allow it to use us, then we become a whole new thing. Now, stages in Kingdoms 1 and 2 basically happen at the physical level. This is how the world works, the world that we can see. At the level of the invisible, at the level of Kingdoms 3 and 4, or Stages 3 and 4, things get a little wonky. Because what happens is all of those tools and that use of will that we learn to save us from being victims, we are asked to surrender. Yeah, I know. Who came up with this idea? I think it's just plain mean. However, it works. And once I get my, as Emerson would say, bloated nothingness out of the way, what I find is that once I can surrender and become the instrument through which spirit plays its beautiful divine harmonies, then amazing things start happening. Ernest Holmes wrote that the imagination is the power of the word. When we speak our word, when we say our prayer, when we say what it is that in oneness with the divine we are claiming as good, when we speak our word, that is the proper use of the imagination and will. He says the word cannot be willed, but it can be imagined or imaged forth into expression. That's in the glossary on page 600 of our textbook. He also wrote on page 418, it is the office of the imagination to set the vision. The vision is something we can see when we are playing in stage 3. This is stage 3 work. It is the office of the imagination to set the vision. The will should hold it in place until the creative genius of the inner life transforms the imagination, transforms the image of limitation and transmutes it into liberty under law. Now, what does that mean? That means that we as a community, whether you have ever physically been to Prescott or not, we as a community have claimed 4 primary values: spiritual growth, inclusivity, joy, and love. And as we continue to focus on that and make our decisions through that lens, the divine being will give us things that we never thought would be possible, that we could never have imagined ourselves until we sat down in Kingdom 3 or Stage 3 and allowed that vision to come to us. And then the proper use of will is to hold that vision in place right before our eyes until the world falls into place. There's an old story about Orville and Wilbur Wright, who flew the first plane, basically, back in 1903 on the beach at Kitty Hawk. Now, this was in December 17th. And I can tell you, having been on that beach myself, they were probably pretty cold. They were not out there for fun. But because of who they were and how they were raised and what was going on through them, whether they called it visioning or stage 27 or whatever, they were able to get a plane off the ground and fly at 120 feet, which had never been done before in that way. They were raised by a very spiritual individual, part of, he was a minister, or an ordained minister, who taught them to allow their imagination and their own thinking free rein, to do their thinking for themselves, to never shut down the great ideas, to allow it to come forth through them. And so no matter what was going on, one of them actually got hurt and was never able to go to college. He ended up taking care of his mother, who was dying of tuberculosis, until her death, while his brother started learning how to do printing presses. So they had a printing press and they used it and published stuff. They learned how to fix and build printing presses. Then they learned how to fix and build bikes. And in their own time, in their off time, they found out as much as they possibly could about aerodynamics and how it all worked. One of the places they wrote to for information was the Smithsonian. And it just so happens that people at the Smithsonian, specifically, what is that man's name? Samuel Pierpoint Langley, who was one of the early presidents at the Smithsonian. He was working on the same issues. Now, he had a better education, at least if you look at, his resume, it looked better. He had more education, he had better funding, he had better resources. But we know the names of Orville Redenbacher. I must be hungry for popcorn. Orville and Wilbur Wright as the people who did the first flight. Now, Langley didn't just sit around twiddling his thumbs. You might have heard of Langley Air Force Base. That's the same Langley. But even though he had all of this outer reason to succeed, the Wright brothers had an inner why, had a vision, had a calling, and their imagination saw them flying. There's even stories about how their father told them, if you fly, don't come home, because God never meant us to fly. I wasn't able to find legitimate proof of that, but it's one of the stories I've heard. So here's the thing. When we get to Kingdom 3, when we are in Stage 3, some of the stuff we do might look wacky. Some of you, I quoted Michael Bernard Beckwith. He and a group of friends, less than a dozen, I believe, sat in his living room and did a visioning process, tried to sit in Kingdom 3 or Stage 3 and listen for the voice of the divine within them. But they did that for years before they ever went out and did anything called founding a church. The story is that Michael Beckwith actually had applied to be the senior minister of a certain California church. And while he had great recommendations and the community wanted him, there was a group within the selection committee, and the selection committee's job is to hand off people who have been vetted to the board and to the congregation to decide if they want them. The selection committee would not hand off his application packet because Michael Beckwith is Black. And they didn't know if in their part of California that was a good idea. They were afraid it would be a divisive move because the congregation was mostly white. Now, Michael Beckwith went and sat on his sofa and did his own work and went within and did the forgiveness work and found the good in it and found the people he wanted to work with. And on the day of his very first service, which I believe was in 1986, he checked and they had $17 in the coffers. In 1986, I was still in high school. Now there are at least 10,000 people who consider them part of Agape International spiritual communities. At least. They have 2 services. Well, actually, they have 3 services on Sunday when they are meeting in person. Those services are in Beverly Hills in a theater that seats about 3,000 each. And I promise you, I know, I've been to Agape. They have people standing illegally in the aisles. I almost can promise it to you. And that number is a drop in the bucket compared to how many people are watching all over the world. Now, I would rather start with the $17 and a dream and a strong sense of a team that knows what Spirit wants to be through them and as them than all of the money and power of the Smithsonian at my back. This is the journey to freedom. We are not beholden to anyone. We don't have to have the money raised first. We don't even have to know what the path looks like. On the journey, on your particular path, on your particular spiritual path, if you don't know what you're doing, that's freaking awesome. That's fantastic, because now nobody has to unteach all of that, get all of that stuff out of your head. You are wide open if you don't know what to do. That's great. That is the very best place to start from. Ernest Holmes once said, if you don't know the only thing to do if you don't know what to do is pray. But the place to start is wherever you are right now. To try and begin anywhere else would be unscientific in his words. He also said, if you have not begun to love everybody, begin to do that at once. You must be willing to love everybody. Your ex, your former mother-in-law, that beautiful child you gave birth to who is now a teenager and you don't know what happened to your kid. The person you look at in the mirror and think, what a total fill in your favorite expletives. You must be willing to love everyone. One of our primary values is inclusivity. We include everyone in the love of the divine. Not to rescue them, not to fix them, not because they're doing it wrong, but because love and joy are inherently part of all of us, and the divine being has those people that we love and that we have challenges loving. Let's just put it that way. Those who we see as part of us, and those who we struggle to see as part of us, part of this community. It is inherent in the process that we will learn that we are all one, and this journey to freedom sets us free from exclusivity, sets us free from the possibility of being left out. And the way we do that, the primary tool we use that's the kingdom to power is prayer. So let's go there now. Now, I like to close my eyes because it helps me stop checking to see if, my hair's okay. And look, closing my outer eyes helps me to open the inner eye and the inner ear. So whatever you need to do that. Be with me now. God, this thing we call the divine, is all there is and all that can ever be. It is power. It is peace. It is freedom. It is ultimate freedom from all of the misinformation that might have happened at the level of effect. It is the light of truth shining so brightly there is nothing else to be seen. It is perfection. It is joy, and it is love. Love for all, in all, through all, and as all. It is that fourth stage that defies description. It is Kingdom 4, where God is in the world as, fully as, without any kind of separation. This is the divine that goes beyond words. And I am part of it right now. It is that power that is speaking me right now. That is true prayer. That is true spiritual mind treatment. And so I speak my word on behalf of all sentient beings everywhere and everywhen. Everyone who hears this is indwelt by the divine, and thus it is the divine listening within each and every other person to the divine within me. And we are in agreement. And so I speak my word for all of us, knowing that perfect freedom, freedom from fear, freedom from all of that, and freedom to create the world that works for everyone. Freedom to be rich in every sense of the word. Freedom to be healthy and whole. Freedom to be connected to the beloveds of the beloved in every way that serves the greater good. And I celebrate that this is simply what spirit is and always has been. What spirit can never stop being in any of us. It is that power and that truth that lives as all of us right now. And I simply release anything that looks unlike that as a lie. I no longer hold on to it. I choose freedom from it, for myself and all beings everywhere. And resting in this truth right here and now, I know it is already done, because what is done in the mind of God must happen at the level of effect, must take form in the real world, the physical world. And so I rest in that with a grateful heart, knowing Spirit's already got this and has already said yes, and the law of cause and effect is already at work. And so I rest in that, knowing it's done. I call it all good and very good, and so it is.